The 5 Point Generals are viewed as one of the biggest threats in the GTA at that time.
There was a number of shootings that were attributed to the 5 Point Generals and their members within a very short period of time.
With that escalation of that kind of gun violence, we were looking for where these guns are coming from, who is bringing these guns in. It took a wiretap of this magnitude and significance to take these individuals out.
So we're listening, we're watching.
On May 23rd, there was calls coming that there was something coming across the border.
Wait a minute. Stop. How much did they get? 60, right?
Like the stage was set for them to acquire a large shipment of guns, and we were set to intercept it. He reverses into the driveway. Someone unknown to us opens the trunk, takes a large package out, a heavy package, puts it in the back. We do a high-risk vehicle stop of a vehicle and bringing his vehicle to a halt.
At the time was the biggest firearm seizure in the history of the Toronto Police.
Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. In Canada's largest city, one of the biggest threats to public safety is the escalating gang violence that has turned the streets into battlegrounds. Deadly force is now the preferred method to settle scores, and innocent bystanders are often paying the price. Now, to stop the flow of illegal guns from across the U.S. border, police are fighting back, working to infiltrate the street gangs before more lives are lost. Here now is Caryn Lieberman with the hand behind the gun.
Weston Road and Lawrence Avenue in Toronto's West End. The sounds of a busy, vibrant community at work and at play. But lately, these streets have been shattered by different sounds.
One male was armed with a sawed-off shotgun, while the other male was in possession of a handgun. They were only in the store for 5 seconds. It was a frenzied attack. They just opened fire in the direction of the table with total disregard for the safety of anybody in the store.
We quickly ran down the street. I was able to see that they were at least pumping his chest to try to revive him. When we got to the hospital, they said that he was already gone.
I miss my baby. My baby was a good boy.
Gerald Hagley was just 17 years old. Shot while out for late-night pizza with friends.
A survivor of gun violence, they transformed our beloved teenager on the brink of his manhood from a living, breathing person to a statistic.
It's been an epidemic surging in Toronto since 2005, the year of the gun.
There's definitely there's a murder here.
18-year-old Eamon Beckles was gunned down by the front doors of this North Etobicoke church while attending his best friend Jamal Hemming's funeral. The 17-year-old had also been shot to death a week earlier.
A shocked congregation watches paramedics lift Eamon Beckles into an ambulance alongside his best friend's hearse.
The question I need to ask, how many more victims are we going to have until it's going to stop? If we stand up and we say no more, the gangsters are going to have to hear it. They can't hide behind the guns. They can't hide behind the silence, because we as a people are not going to let them hide any longer.
Fast forward to 2018. Gun and gang-related homicides in Toronto have almost doubled in the last 5 years.
Right here in this area, I would say this is the core of the 5PG territory, their drug turf. And there's been numerous shootings and numerous homicides right here on these streets, and many of them are directly related to the 5PG.
The 5 Point Generals, Police intelligence have been investigating them for months.
The 5PG were responsible for at least 4 murders, 10 attempted murders, I think it was 69 robberies.
And detectives fear the violence is escalating.
There was a number of shootings that were attributed to the 5 Point Generals and their members within a very short period of time. There were some retaliations going back and forth between different gangs in the city. They were getting out of control.
Along with the escalation of violence in the street is the constant intimidation through social media and the bragging and postings of gang symbols and their tattoos and flashing their money and their weapons and the fueling of the conflict through music videos.
Fresh out of jail, back in the game like Vic.
They did have a hierarchy. I would say Joe Dawkins was at the top of that list. This group shared in their resources, their profits, and also their weapons. We identified that there was 145 guns seized from this particular group of their associates.
With that escalation of that kind of gun violence, we were looking for where these guns are coming from. Who is bringing these guns in? There's potential for being live calls of where the shootings are about to occur. That's my.
The Guns and Gangs Major Project section launches Project Patton.
In February of 2018, we were granted an authorization to intercept private communications of 91 named persons.
Once we start going live right off the start, who are we going to target?
When we do our initial wiretap authorization, we look to identify the back ends, who's supplying drugs, who's supplying the firearms to our organization.
In a covert location, they're about to infiltrate this dangerous gang's world.
Once we flip the switch, once we go live, there is no easing into it. Anything could happen on day one.
I was one of the lead investigators in the wire room. Our job is to direct surveillance, listen to intercepts as they come in.
Yo, yeah.
We end up listening to about 30 lines at a time, but some people can have multiple phones.
Is that what? It's a mixture of things and...
We're getting thousands of calls a day.
Investigators are hearing the information. The surveillance team receives the information and we become the eyes of the project, and we're being directed towards the violence, towards the people who are committing the violence.
Andrew, he was driving down the street and all of a sudden he calls into the wire room. He says, I'm hearing shots being fired. I'm not sure where they're coming from.
I pull up to this light, and as I'm sitting here at 5:30 in the evening, gunshots go off. Pedestrians on this side of the street, pedestrians on that side of the street, they're running northbound, they're running eastbound. Honestly, pandemonium out here. I call the wire room, and almost immediately it's one of our targets on the line who's been shooting into traffic. We're able to arrest him and seize the firearm he actually used in that shooting.
They take down violent crime, but want to uncover who is putting guns into hands.
We start intercepting communications of certain individuals. One of them was Bill Allison. Bill Allison was an affiliate of many of these 5 Point Generals.
So what time are you?
He's speaking to a male in Florida. He was referring to as Biggs.
One Japanese on right now.
This group spoke patois.
Something completely different. Understand?
It was a very hard patois, very difficult to even understand.
Pick up the Irish much there.
There was coded language used. There's different terms for guns, for drugs, for money.
They listen into a call from a car. A meeting is going down between Allison and an unknown male.
Come, make a right, Paul Lawrence. I'm meeting the other shoppers. All right, cool.
Something that had a criminal element to it. And at that point, so I contacted Detective Steinwell, said, we need to see this meet. We need to identify who Mr. Allison is meeting with, and advised him that we believe this transaction is going to be down at the shops of Don Mills.
So our surveillance team sets up in that area, and we're waiting for somebody, and we're not sure who it is. So we race to this area, and we actually find them in the parking lot. They acknowledge each other, and then they follow each other in tandem through the lights and down the Donway, and both vehicles then turn down this driveway.
Next to these high-rise condos.
Next to these high-rise condos, and one vehicle in front of the other. Both get out, have brief conversation, and the male goes to the trunk of his minivan and takes out a package. He gives it to Bill Allison, he puts it in his vehicle, and I observe all of that.
Detectives follow a man not known to them before.
He pulls into his driveway, and from his truck he pulls out several boxes of mangoes and puts them in his garage.
At that point is how we identified Harris Poyser in this criminal organization.
They later hear what was in that package.
The one them give you, him have way prettiest than that man. Come on there. Okay, all right.
What we believe and know now is that there was a firearm transaction between the shops of Don Mills.
As the investigation into this group gathers steam, we realize that these firearms are coming from the United States, and they're going to go directly to the streets of Toronto into the hands of criminals.
There's been an uptick in gun violence in Toronto's West End, and police are zeroing in on a supply pipeline for a violent gang. Steps away from a busy shopping plaza, they observe a meeting that pays off.
Harris Poyser met with Bill Allison that day, and there's clearly an exchange on that day. It's like, wow, we have a gun trafficking right off the start like this. How big is this?
They hear that the firearm was arranged by someone across the border.
And give us the victory again and again.
Who appears to be singing a day after the delivery.
We intercepted Biggs. They had a Florida phone number under a false name. This was a subject that was completely unknown to us.
Hello? Yeah.
You could tell that he was very skilled at what he was doing as far as criminal activity, and this was not his first rodeo.
Who get them paper? Momsy. Ready. Momsy.
In a three-way call, they hear Biggs arrange another meeting with someone by the name of Mumsy.
The intercept came in, and it was clear that Bill Allison was going to meet Mumsy, and there was going to be an exchange of money, but also an exchange of information.
So that Queen on 50? Yeah.
Yeah, Queen on 50 me there. I found basic. Where you there?
Not that far from there. That's why I asked you. All right, give me 5 minutes. All right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The observations were made in a grocery store parking lot. That's where they ended up meeting up. She was parked. Bill Allison pulls into the parking lot, parks close to her. He goes over and meets with her, provides her with a bundle, and then she left the location.
We didn't think Mumsy's role was that big other than being the recipient of potentially money or whatever Allison had given her. We believe it was money because looking back at it, it was a gun on that day that Harris Poyser gave to Bill Allison.
Harris Poyser, on the other hand, becomes a big target in this investigation.
When we first identified Harris Poyser, wasn't our typical gun trafficker. He was an older man, he had a family, he had a normal job. I recall it was importing fruit from Jamaica. Once we started listening to Harris Poyser, it opened up the big picture.
Good morning, sir.
Pleasant good morning, sir. How you doing?
I'm good.
So we have about 30 Japanese here right now.
So in May of 2018, information was given to us from the wire room that Harris Poyser was meeting 2 of his associates in this parking lot. And they met roughly in this area here. Harris Poyser parked his vehicle in this spot. One male comes up, very young looking, sunglasses, approaches Harris Poyser, and we think, who is this? We have a second male approach. They all seem to be deep in conversation.
Kareem Lewis Lewis was identified through facial recognition. So we had such a good face shot of him from the surveillance video, we were able to get that matched to an arrest photo that we already had on file with the service. And then Kamar Cunningham was identified through the vehicle that he arrived in.
We weren't sure what their roles were in this group. We really weren't sure what Harris Poyser's role was in this group, but we were going to find out very shortly. That day, later, Harris Poyser went on his way, and Kamar Cunningham and Kareem Lewis drove to Cornwall.
A border town in eastern Ontario, around 100 kilometers from the capital, Ottawa.
They went to a house on 515 Oliver Lane in Cornwall. And not much on the lines about any pickups, any guns, any drugs coming back, or was it money going to the person at Cornwall?
They pulled on a street where we couldn't get any observations, and then they drove back directly on the highway.
At this point, we didn't know what was exchanged, if anything at all. We followed the targets back to the city.
What we didn't realize at that time, there was an exchange of guns that was coming back.
The very next day, Kamar Cunningham met Harris Poyser again in this lot, and went closer towards this World's Gym.
They were sitting in their vehicles. There was a door-to-door meeting, but unfortunately our surveillance team wasn't set up in a position to observe that.
And although information was coming from the wire room that there was possibly a firearm transaction, we were unable to see anything change hands.
We were never able to make the call to do a takedown at that moment.
From that meet, we don't follow Poyser, we follow Kamar. Kamar Cunningham was then followed back to Mississauga, where he was seen carrying a bag from his vehicle and meeting people in and around his condo.
A call tells them what they missed.
They discussed how the guns weren't good guns.
Which one did I load?
The old one, you want one rusty one, come on, brown,
That need I load?
Some of them were rusted, some were broken.
Everybody load, brother.
No, man, one old rusty one, man. You what? You know that was a mistake,
one, but it can load.
It wasn't until later that intercepts told us that 30 firearms exchanged hands that day.
What was scary is that Kamar Cunningham was able to get rid of those guns so quick. And they weren't good guns. They were rusted. They were just selling them off and people were taking them.
He's the one who delivers it to the streets.
Just weeks into the wiretap, they've discovered a cell that's bringing guns to Toronto, and they've just missed a big shipment.
We were frustrated, we were a bit upset, but it wasn't long after that we started to receive information that there would be a larger load coming in from Cornwall.
We determined at that point in time there was not going to be another shipment making it through. So we were going to do everything we could possibly do to ensure the second shipment was not making it into Toronto.
What they don't realize is that the next shipment will be the biggest in Toronto police history. That is, if they catch it.
Welcome back. Just weeks into a massive wiretap investigation, Toronto police are dropped into an international smuggling ring. They are rushing to connect the dots before the pipeline brings more guns over the border. We now return to Caryn Lieberman with the hand behind the gun.
Toronto's Guns and Gangs team is on high alert for another shipment of guns.
At that point, we didn't know what was going on in Florida, how these guns were getting up here. We knew nothing other than the fact they showed up on the other side of the border in Cornwall.
Detectives ask alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents to track down a target with a Florida phone number.
We hear that we have an individual who goes by Biggs. Did not know his true identity, and we were able to determine that he had multiple driver's licenses and a couple of different passports in alternative identities.
They've tracked him all across the state of Florida with no luck.
On May 23rd, there was calls coming that there was something coming across the border, that Biggs had set it up down there.
Wait a minute. Well, stop. How much do they get? 60, right?
In Toronto, they also witness a flurry of activity.
So we're listening, we're watching, we're taking every little detail into consideration so we don't miss this shipment. While Harris Poyser jostles around his mangoes, he's also looks to be animated when he's talking to Kamar.
And right away we determined that Poyser was going to go to Cornwall, and Caryn Lewis was going to go to Cornwall with him. And we had 2 surveillance teams on.
They've trailed cars up this route before, but never like this. A transport crash has caused the highway to ignite on fire.
On that day, all traffic, the 401 was closed, all traffic was diverted off of the highway, and so it was very challenging to get him to Cornwall.
While stuck in traffic,
Then it moved from E14.
they rely on the wire room or listening into their targets in hopes of finding out what they're picking up.
I don't know. Yeah, I think, yeah. I think 60, yeah.
And they talked 60 and 100, you're still thinking kilos of coke. So on that date, was it the guns coming across or was it drugs coming across?
We follow Harris Poyser to Cornwall. We set up observations there and we're waiting. We're waiting to see what Travis is hearing in the wire room.
Trust me. They're supposed to done already, because they're pretty.
Yeah.
Everyone.
And at one point, Harris Poyser says very quickly at the end of the conversation, he says to Biggs, how are they wrapped? Are they wrapped nicely?
You put them in a plastic bag each?
No, man, they must scotch up them wrap the right way. Them
Very
wrap
good, very good.
His response to that was, no, they're all packaged very softly so they don't scratch. At that point, I realized it was guns and not drugs. No one cares about scratching kilos of cocaine. I've never heard that term. But scratching new guns, that would devalue them. So at that point, I was confident there was 60 guns.
The stage was set for them to acquire a large shipment of guns, and we were set to intercept it. When they get to Cornwall, Caryn Lewis goes to a rest stop on the highway, and he waits for Poyser.
Harris Poyser was observed to go to 515 Oliver Lane.
He reverses into the driveway. Someone unknown to us opens the trunk. It goes to the garage, takes a large package out, heavy package, puts it in the back, goes back to the garage. I relay that information to Travis Clark, and he corroborates the information that he's receiving on the wiretap.
He said there were very heavy bags, just 2 of them, that went into Mr. Poyser's vehicle.
Poyser never gets out of the car. The trunk is closed, and then he turns back the exact same way he came.
After Poyser picked up the guns, Poyser was calling Lewis to meet up and do the exchange, but Lewis didn't answer the phone because he was asleep. And because we had our surveillance team watching him, so we knew he was asleep, and that's why he wasn't answering the phone.
The surveillance team in the plane followed Poyser out of the area.
When he gets onto the road that leads to the highway, my thoughts were, we cannot let him get onto the highway. And from there, Travis Clark is confident enough to tell us to stop the vehicle, arrest Poyser for possession of firearm, and seize what is in the trunk.
He had a full grasp of the moment, as well as I did, and the chance we're about to take. And when I see that word takedown, I'm putting one of my best friends, Andrew Steinwall, in a precarious position, but I'm asking him to do his job. They have to take this individual in custody. They have a natural fight or flight mentality like most humans do. And most of them are armed. It's a very dangerous situation to be in. Then I hung up the phone and I sat and waited. And at that point, it was just quiet. It was quiet.
Adrenaline is pumping at this time. We're hoping that, we were right. We're hoping that what we are seeing are firearms in there, and we're hoping that the information that Travis Clark received was accurate. We do a high-risk vehicle stop of a vehicle by surrounding his vehicle with other vehicles and bringing his vehicle to a halt. Harris Poyser is taken out without any incident, and I go directly to the trunk.
The room was intense, and you could hear a pin drop waiting for that call from the team and Detective Steinwall to let us know exactly what they found.
And the call came in, and I could hear it in his voice. I've known Andrew, we've worked together our entire careers. I could hear it in his voice.
We pop the trunk, and there is 2 duvet cases, plastic, see-through, and you could tell that these would be ideal for putting firearms in and not scratching them. And he said, "How many are in there?" I said, "A lot, like a lot." At first, I think I told him, I feel 10, I feel like 15. I think there's 30 in this one. I think Travis said to me, "Are you lying? Are you lying?" I'm not lying. There's not 5, there's 10, there's 20, there's 30 in each bag.
And at that moment, it's just like the stress of getting this, and actually massive part of our goal was to stop the flow of guns into this community.
I stayed with the firearms, and while I was waiting for Cornwall Police, I proved the firearm safe on the hood of the vehicle. It actually looked very pretty on the top of the hood, top of the police car. I was thinking about what Travis had told me, that they said these are pretty guns, and they look pretty. Like, there was pink guns and camouflage and light blue.
Those pictures were sent back to the wire room, and it was a pure celebration.
There were a lot of high fives that day.
It was the single largest seizure of guns in Toronto police history.
I can advise that 60 of the handguns that you see before you today were obtained in a single seizure from an individual who was intending on delivering them to high-ranking individuals within the 5-Point General's hierarchy. The guns were destined to become crime guns in Toronto and the GTA.
They described in the intercepts as pretty little things. They were pink camouflage, they were small, they had extended magazines that could hold, illegally hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition in that gun. So when you get them all laid out with the colors, colors of the rainbow, they were pretty little guns.
They're so perfect for carrying on your person. They're almost meant to match your outfit, to show your friends. Like, these are guns that can be easily concealed and all in the hands of criminals. They are so dangerous.
I don't know how many homicides we stopped. I don't know how many shootings we stopped, how many innocent victims were saved from 60 guns being out there.
But the big question on their minds, is there more to come?
From the time the guns were seized, law enforcement scrambling, trying to figure out where did these guns come from? Most importantly, are there more that we missed that are going to reach the destination?
They uncover that this was one of 2 shipments.
They had 40 guns apparently that were coming again. There was indications they were in New York. No idea where they were in New York.
We suspect what happened is once we seized the 60 guns in Cornwall, they shut down operations, and those 40 guns never made it back into Canada, and we never had any further intercepts to indicate that those guns made it into Canada.
There is little chatter on the lines.
We were only intercepting Biggs through his conversations with Bill Allison and with Harris Poyser at that point. So once we arrest those individuals, it's quiet. It's quiet.
At this time, we still didn't know who Biggs was. Obviously, he's the central figure who's arranging all of this.
So after the guns are seized, we begin the task of identifying the firearms through their serial numbers and determining where they were purchased and who purchased them.
I was a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, commonly known as ATF. The ATF became part of the investigation immediately to help facilitate and coordinate the traces. ATF has to call the manufacturer, who then calls the importer or wholesaler, who then calls the individual dealer, and the individual dealer maintains a paper record of that purchase.
They trace the guns back to Central Florida.
The Central Florida Gun Show is at the Central Florida Fairgrounds, and it's held quarterly. Vendors, which are normally federal firearms licensees, they set up a table and they're able to sell to the public. Over 60 of them were bought in that location.
And they discover they were bought by just 3 people.
We go to the gun dealer and we say, okay, can you just give us everything you have from the purchase? If you have surveillance video, we wanted to know were there other people present during the purchase. In this case, the purchasers acted alone. They bought 10, 15 guns. The exchange occurred just like any other, and they walked away. So what we found was that the purchasers were not what you would call like career criminals. However, they were exploited and used by career criminals to put their name on firearms. We had 3 different people, seemingly unrelated. The fact that they didn't know each other and they told a consistent story and they appeared coached on how to potentially evade prosecution and evade capture, it showed us the level of sophistication within this organization.
So combined, those 3 individuals ended up purchasing 58 of the 60 handguns within 4 days of them arriving in Canada.
It's a very short time to crime, the time it takes for an illegal gun to end up in the hands of a criminal.
And we're used to seeing hundreds of days, sometimes years, on the time to crime stats when we seize a gun, but in this case, we knew it was a direct line from Florida up to Canada through Cornwall.
They don't believe they came through a border checkpoint.
Through our investigation, we determined that they came north into the border on the U.S. side, at which point they utilized a male known to us only as Apache to bring them through the Akwesasne Reserve just in the Cornwall area.
We had an idea of who he was. There was never enough evidence to identify who he was.
They are still trying to put a face to the man they think is calling the shots.
Biggs was the one telling how many were going. He was coordinating with Allison. He was coordinating with Apache. He was coordinating with Harris Poyser.
For somebody to disguise who they are, where they live, continually move around multiple states in the U.S., multiple countries, through multiple identities. As far as level of criminal, he would be somebody who's at the top.
After a 9-month investigation, they make the call to take down the 5-point generals.
We were about to kick in the doors of 49 residences, and we needed the assistance of 21 tactical teams to do so. And our goal was to arrest the 60 suspected gang members and their associates.
The magnitude of the takedown, given there's so many to arrest, the violence of these individuals, the guns that we expected still to be in their residences.
As they execute warrants, the gun tally grows.
In the basement of one of the residences, we found a firearm manufacturing and modification operation.
So they were building basically Frankenstein guns and then distributing them out onto the street. And we seized, I think, 5 of them during our investigation for Project Patton, and then shut down this individual that was building them.
There was 78 firearms seized at the end of the project. I believe there was 93 people arrested and charged.
They arrest all but one of the suspects they've identified in this gun smuggling ring.
When we do our takedown, Kamar Cunningham had actually fled the country. He was out of the country in Jamaica, so we put out a warrant for his arrest.
Just have a seat on that wall there.
They bring in one of their very first targets, Bill Allison, for questioning.
Okay, who's Biggs?
Biggs is a guy in the States.
They're closing in on the man who they believe is the architect of a firearms pipeline.
Welcome back. In a major crackdown, police arrested nearly 100 alleged associates of a violent street gang, bringing a wave of hope to the city's fight against crime. Well, authorities are now focused on tracking down the mastermind behind the illegal flow of firearms crossing the border. Here now is Caryn Lieberman with a conclusion of the hand behind the gun.
He'll be one of the first lines up. He's probably going to have multiple.
Detectives hope to finally put a face on the man they say is at the top of an international firearms smuggling ring.
There's a lot of people that were arrested this morning. We're alleging that you're part of a criminal organization, a larger group.
They've arrested Bill Allison, the target they followed to the shops at Don Mills and witnessed receive a package from Harris Poyser, which they later heard was a firearm.
Have you come into possession of firearms in the last 3 months by anybody on the street or anything like that?
No.
No? So you don't sell firearms or anything?
I don't sell firearms.
What if I told you we've been listening to you for 3 months on your phone?
You've been listening to my phone for 3 months?
Yeah.
Maybe possible.
Yeah?
Yo! Yeah.
They play back the phone intercepts.
Hello? Hello? Yo. What you at, Jess?
They want to know who the other voice is, the man he was speaking with.
What's his actual name?
I don't know his actual name. I know his mom.
And it just became more clear that he was the son of Barbara Booth.
Surveillance teams identified Barbara Booth, who they knew as Mumsy, after she allegedly met with Bill Allison in this grocery store parking lot.
Mumsy got arrested too?
That's his mom, but I don't know.
Yeah, she's here.
She's here.
Because you gave her money and to send for him. What do you think Mumsy's going to tell us? What the money's for?
I don't know.
Don't know. Hello?
Hey.
It's Barbara.
Yeah.
And last name Booth.
Yes.
Does the name Biggs mean anything to you?
Huh?
Does the nickname Biggs mean anything to you?
Biggs?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Never heard that name before?
She has 2 older sons. One piques their interest.
Okay. What's his name?
Ernest Wilson.
Ernest Wilson, okay. When's the last time you spoke to him?
I don't remember.
What was your purpose of meeting Allison that day?
I don't remember.
Don't remember?
No.
Okay.
Barbara Booth denies meeting and receiving money from Bill Allison.
If you were to receive a sum of money, $4,600 at the food base, that's something you would remember?
How much?
$4,600.
No, sir. Money?
Mm-hmm.
No, sir.
On June 21st, when we had Barbara Booth, Mumsy, in a room and the other members of this network, ultimately we were able to discover that Ernest Wilson was Barbara Booth's son and also believed to be Biggs at that time.
Police quickly discover Ernest Wilson is wanted.
Ernest Wilson was a fugitive. He was arrested for possession for the purpose of trafficking cocaine. I believe he fled. He didn't appear in court after he was released, and he fled at that time.
Ernest Wilson was a Canadian citizen that was hiding out in the States and trying to evade arrest in our country.
When Toronto police find out, they let us know the marshals down in South Florida were tracking Ernest Wilson.
As the manhunt intensifies across the border, Kamar Cunningham is captured in Toronto.
He flew back into Pearson Airport, and when he arrived at Pearson, he ended up getting identified and arrested.
The Crown prepares to prosecute this cell, but all will not be brought to trial. Shortly after arrest, Kareem Lewis took his own life. Detectives get a call about Ernest Wilson.
The marshals had a location for Wilson in Coconut Creek, Florida, and they were looking to apprehend him. They tracked him down to a certain apartment complex, but they were too late. He had been murdered, killed via a gunshot wound, about 4 hours before the marshals located him. We feel that he was killed due to an ongoing dispute that he had with others based on the life he was living.
I am talking just in general. I am not non-parents.
Barbara Booth, she was charged with a very minor offense in the overall scope of the criminal organization. So at that time, the decision was made to drop the charge on her, and then she was able to travel to the U.S. to collect her son's body.
In 2020, the trial is set to go remotely. Just months before, Harris Poyser pleads guilty to firearms importation and trafficking, leaving Bill Allison and Kamar Cunningham to stand.
There's a lot of elements to that, to meet and prove to a judge that they were knowingly and actively a part of this criminal organization.
They're supposed to done already, because they're pretty. Yeah, everyone.
Based on these complex investigations, it is a real challenge for the Crown attorneys. Hours and hours of surveillance video, hundreds of thousands of wiretap intercepts.
Yeah, we're supposed to get 62.5, but him have $500 for me.
There's no better evidence than listening to the accused with his own voice talk about their own criminal activities.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, the wiretap produced the best evidence possible to result in numerous convictions.
Harris Poyser is sentenced to 15 years for firearms importation and trafficking.
Bill Allison was charged in relation to the firearms trafficking. He received a sentence of 6 years and 8 months.
Kamar Cunningham was convicted of firearms trafficking, but he was not there to hear his sentence.
Even though he had been convicted and was facing a fairly serious sentence, they released him on bail again, and then very short time before his actual sentencing date, he was reported missing by his sureties, the people that were supposed to be responsible for monitoring his activities, and he has not been seen since. So I applied to have him added to the BOLO program. They agreed, and there's currently a $50,000 reward for his arrest.
Kamar Cunningham may or may not be pulling the trigger, but he is definitely putting the firearms into hands of people who would pull the trigger. How important is apprehending Kamar Cunningham? Extremely important for the safety of the citizens of Toronto.
At the end of the project, they stopped 78 guns from making it to the streets.
We take Project Patton, from what we saw, stopped that flow of guns. There's a lot for an illegal firearm to get from a gun show in Orlando into the hands of an individual in Toronto who's going to do a homicide. There's a lot of people in control, and there's a lot of people responsible for bringing those guns here to Canada, and they're responsible for those shootings that occur on the street. It took a wiretap of this magnitude and significance to take these individuals out.
Immediately after Project Patton, we saw a noted decrease in the level of violence, especially the level of gun violence in this area. At that time, they were one of the greatest risks to public safety in our city, and we did our best to dismantle them.
Despite the success of takedowns like Project Patton and the thousands of illegal weapons seized each year, crime guns continue to flow into Canada. Police say every gun on the street matters. It only takes one round to devastate a community. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.